Hey everybody, welcome back to the Convo Couch. And today we have a special show. As you know, we have been covering the protests all over the country, and we wanted to get a really first-hand account as to what happened in Wisconsin, what's happened since Jacob Blake was shot, and what's happened after Kyle Rittenhouse shot several people and killed two. So today we have two guests. The first one is Andre Walton. He is a political activist in the Southeast regional organizer for our Wisconsin Revolution. Andre Walton, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me on, Fiorella.
Um,
Sorry if I said your name wrong.
no, you're good. It's Fiorella, but
Okay, gotcha.
no problem. So I know you guys have been really busy covering a lot of this, and especially as activists, as organizers, dealing with a lot of the politics, but also the community issues that happen. So, did you attend protests for Jacob Blake? And tell us what you've seen at these protests.
Yeah, I attended most of the protests so far for Jacob Blake. So when I was there, I got there the first day, and I was there kind of just to cover protests and kind of observe as an OWR representative. And what I noticed, there was a lot of energy and a lot of people upset about what happened to Jacob Blake. And it was very peaceful for the first, I would say, like good 4 hours. And protesters were stopping traffic. They were making civil disobedience, but there was no like problems that I seen initially. We did have a situation, or we did come up face to face with police at two different distinct points during the protest. But there was just like regular shouting, people saying things to the police, but no violence. Towards the night, that's when things started to get a little bit different, because usually at night is when people who don't traditionally go to protest start to come out and have different agendas. That's when water bottles were starting being thrown at the police officers, and I think we were there, and I was like live streaming, and then we caught this lady who was there who out of nowhere, I don't even think she was part of the protest. Obviously that's speculation, but we just noticed a lady bring a case full of water bottles
Mm,
in the middle of a protest where there were no bottles, and then all you seen was just water bottles continuously thrown at the police officers. It
I
was really
see.
weird. But that's when eventually they started putting out the tear gas and then the rubber pellets, and that's when it pretty much escalated from that point.
Right. So, but nothing like fire, like burning at that point yet. This was
Not at that point.
okay.
At least nothing that I seen in the area that I was at. It was just mostly people just kind of shouting, kind of like some water being thrown, but nothing like destruction or anything broken at the point that I seen.
Okay. And how did things change after Kyle Rittenhouse shot several people and killed two? Because you were there the day before the
hmm
protest, the day before Kyle was there, and then the day after.
Well, I think it brought more people out, because these militia dudes came from out of state. They weren't from Wisconsin. Most of them, I have no idea who they were, or even if they lived in Kenosha. And Kyle Rittenhouse is highly widely reported that he was only 17, so he wasn't even supposed to have a gun. Came into the state, and the people who were shot, they were actually from the state of Wisconsin. I think it brought more people out, and brought more support, because people seen that not only is there injustice when it comes to police brutality, but there's also injustice with these right wing militia groups. And I think it really coalesce the left a little bit more, because I got a chance to talk to some people who are not even traditional protesters, but they were like, "I'm just sick of seeing such brutality and injustice on the head of minorities." So I think it was counterproductive on the hand of not only the police department, but also the right wing militia, because if their job was to protect property, so to speak, it actually made more people radicalize and more people come out. So I don't think it did really any justice. But the protest I did go to after the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, it was very peaceful. Jacob Blake's family was there, and there was a lot of speakers from all over the place. but it was a peaceful protest, and they encouraged people to go back to their homes after the curfew. I only stayed until about 6 that day,
Okay.
but it was all peaceful. There was no trouble at all.
And the reason I'm asking this is because that's not what not just the alt right, but some other people who aren't even there. They're saying like these protests are violent. They're starting riots and all of this, and people like Kyle were protecting property. And so I do want to ask because there was that clip that Fox got a hold of at the very end, and I never put it up because I got some of you guys' footage and I posted that, but there was a clip that happened during one of the speeches because we know Fred Hampton Jr. spoke, Jacob Blake's family spoke, but there was somebody that said, if like somebody that kind of threatened certain white people, and I think Fox got a hold of that and did something. What did the person exactly say, and what do you feel about this kind of like tension? Because I feel like a lot of people are trying to start a race war, and I think the vast majority of people do not want that.
Yeah, so to put context into this whole situation about that,
Mm-hmm.
so OWR was co-sponsoring the event, so we were trying to be informed as possible in who was the speakers, and we were not informed about who the speaker was, and we think it was like a last minute addition who wasn't vetted. But overall, the speakers were very peaceful, and then out of nowhere, this guy, and to this day, we still don't actually know his name. He was just referred to as the president or something like that.
Interesting.
And he one of some of the things he was saying was like, "Oh, if they kill us, we need to kill one of them," and
Right.
this is about color and things like that. But if you were in the crowd, a lot of people, there was a lot of cheers and prior speaking, but there was nobody cheering. It was actually in the area that I was at, people were actually booing because they didn't agree with what he was saying.
Right.
Because it was a peaceful protest and it was all about coalition building with the people who aren't black.
Yeah.
So a lot of people didn't even understand where that message was coming from. So this dude was a complete outlier, and nobody knew who he was. So the whole to paint the protest as if it was violent, this was the advocation of it. Then that's just misleading because the overwhelming majority of the speakers were speaking peacefully, saying we just want to be out here and protest peacefully, and get justice for Jacob Blake.
Yeah.
So I mean, everybody that I know, at least, who was at the protest, condemned that guy, and we still don't know who that is.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to show the video footage that I put a couple days ago because you can see in the speeches everybody's talking about we don't tear down the city, don't do this, don't do that. So everybody was pretty in agreement the whole time. I mean, it was hours of protest footage, and I just want to know, is Kenosha, to your knowledge, a racially divided city? And how bad is that in your opinion?
So, for those who know Wisconsin, Kenosha is not unique to any racial divide. I mean, the whole state has racial divisions. I mean, for example, Milwaukee and Racine are the most racially segregated cities in the country. And Kenosha is kind of like a smaller segment of that overall situation. So Kenosha is no different. They just have a less population of a black population. So just like any other disparities in Wisconsin, where there's segregation, there's disparities. It's just the same. And if you know Milwaukee, we've already had situations and
Right.
run-ins with police, so it just kind of extended to Kenosha with the Jacob Blake situation.
And what about these militants though? Like, are they hard to? Is it hard to tell who, um, is like a right wing militia person, and then are there like left wing militia? Because all like I said, a lot of people are like, oh, Antifa is there also.
Mhm.
Is it hard to decipher what is what?
Not really. It's actually pretty clear. So I've been into a number of protests. I've been to anti-Trump protests. I've been to Black Lives Matter protests. I've been to DNC protests. And in every case, you can pretty much spot the right-wing militia people out. They're usually the ones who are talking the loudest and being very brazen about what they're there for. But what I did notice in the Kenosha protests, there were no. I don't think I've seen any Antifa people there, at least not identifying as Antifa, just random people out there. But if anything, the right wing militia, as a result of the Cal Rittenhouse situation, actually brought armed left wing people out. And I didn't see any like long rifles or anything, but there were armed left wingers out in the protest the next day. But there was still no violence, to my knowledge, for the people I talked to. They were just there to make sure, no protesters were being threatened by any right wing militia. But at the protests I've been at least for the Jacob Blake family, I didn't see any right wing militia at that point. They didn't seem to come out until nighttime, and it's pretty easy to spot them.
And how do you think, especially being in Wisconsin and at the heart of a lot of what's happening, that we can solve this issue of police brutality when protesters are now either targeted or being accused of being the violent ones?
Well, I think the way we solve it is that we have to stop looking at it as a political agenda, because at the end of the day, it's not about politics; it's about life. Because at the end of the day, even if he was in the wrong, maybe he didn't listen to the officer, maybe he resisted arrest. Police officers shouldn't be judge, jury, and executioner. And if you actually believe in the Constitution and believe in law, you wouldn't advocate for the killing of civilians, whether they had some past prior record at all. And I think also we have to really, well, this is just a specifically Wisconsin thing. I think the gerrymandering has a lot to do with stifling legislation as well, because even though Democrats aren't the best in Wisconsin, they have introduced pretty good bills to deal with some of the police reforms. But we have a majority Republican legislator, which is pretty much blocking any legislation from getting through, because Tony Evers has introduced bills to deal with some of these police reforms. I think they could go a lot farther, but I think he introduced them with the mindset of just getting something through with the Republicans.
Right.
But they don't even want to bring it to a vote. So I think dealing with gerrymandering and also stop seeing this whole situation as a political agenda will really help us get forward, because a lot of times when a shooting happens, it's immediately, if you're on the right side, you're going to back the badge, and if you're on the left side, it's Black Lives Matter. But at the end of the day, it's just about preserving life and not being killed by government agents.
And where does economics fall into this? How can we combine causes? Because as you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We've also have a lot of people out of work. We have, the government has sort of, the federal government has also failed to give people the proper backing, small businesses as well. Where does economics fall into this movement?
I think it plays a huge part, because the economic disparities in Wisconsin and for black for the black majority is actually a lot higher. I think I'm forgetting the exact number right now, but it's pretty high comparable to the white population. And when you see that, you see increased poverty, and obviously where there's increased poverty, there's a correlation with increased crime. So when you have increased crime, you're going to have overpopulation or over policing in the state, and you're going to have these police seeing the, as inherently relation that more police have decreased crime in Milwaukee. That's why we actually had a forum about how to deal with that with OWR, and they talked about putting more work into social services, and job economic stability. Because right now it's just continuing the situation that has been going on for as long as I can know in Milwaukee, and I grew up in Milwaukee. So I think economics has a huge part to play in the racial disparities and also the economic disparities, and as a result, not directly but indirectly, going to police brutality.
And what like what is the end goal with the protests? A lot of people always ask, well, what do they want? And what
Mhm.
is your opinion on the what can you do to push the Democratic leadership to really oppose the Republicans? Because you say there's a Republican legislature, but at the same time, Democrats
Mhm.
have a lot of power in certain positions that they have in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is one of the states where it could go blue or red
Mhm.
this election. So what do you what do you want the leadership to do in your state?
Well, for me, my personal opinion is that we've got some really good organizers on the ground who are advocating for some really good stuff. So there's one thing called CPAC, which is community policing of basically people controlling the police and oversight of the police. And but there's also a lot of other bills out there that are being floated around, such as in chokeholds, which was passed in Madison City Council, in broken windows policing, defunding some of the police budget and putting that funding into more social services. But I think if we take a step back and actually look how we got into this situation, we do have to understand that Democrats kind of dug their own grave because they had the chance to deal with the gerrymandering and institute a non-partisan districting board, but they didn't do it. Now we are put in a situation where we're dealing with gerrymandering, and we can't really deal with that. So I think if Democrats are going to be in this situation, then they have to be extremely bold, because if you're coming to the table with half measure policies, then you probably won't get anything with this current legislator that we have. So I would say go full out with the policy, and then get as much as you can out of that of those concessions. But if you talk to protesters on the street, different people want different things. Some people want to abolish the police, and they have their reasons for that, mainly because they've had bad experiences with police officers.
Yeah.
Some people just want defunding. It all depends, but me personally, I think some of the things I just suggested would do a great job in actually pushing the agenda left
And
in Wisconsin.
it's not a monolith, right? Like different people want different things. You just mentioned because here in my experience covering the protests, I've seen protesters argue with each other as to the different tactics. Are in your experience, are there different groups? It's not just Black Lives Matter. It's other groups, independent people. Like what type of organizations have you seen, and have you seen a variation in their tactics?
Um, it depends. So as far as tactics, I haven't seen a huge variation in tactics, unless you're talking about some of the people who are rioting, or those are different people altogether. But I think most of the people have the same tactics. They just have different views of what the outcome should be. um, and that does have to do with what you're fighting for. So when I did a forum, the LGBT community had a different agenda, for example, because they wanted policy more protective of the LGBTQ community, which is understandable. And then we had the Latino community, who have a slightly different but similarly the same agenda as well. So it's not necessarily different tactics, but they do have slightly different agendas. But what's nice about it is I haven't really seen any arguments from it. It's more of a solidarity movement, and everybody understands what this movement means. Um, and the people who do argue, it's usually because they want to do really radical things, and they just hate to see anybody who disagrees with them. But it's actually pretty rare from my experience.
So is this election going to change anything? The presidential election, if Biden wins, and how do you feel about him as a candidate? And how do you see the race happening in Wisconsin?
Well, as far as this election, if we go on the prior years of the Obama administration, which Biden served in, if we go based off history, I would say no. And then Biden has selected Kamala Harris, who has a pretty bad criminal justice record on the black people.
Yeah.
But I mean, I honestly don't know. I'm not very enthusiastic or feeling good about what the outcomes are, because as a black man in Wisconsin, we've seen Democratic and Republican administrations, and I can tell you from my experience that nothing's ever really changed in Milwaukee. So I'm not really um, optimistic that things will change, and I think a lot of people are obviously put into the situation where they have to choose between the lesser of two evils, and that's what we are continually put into. But I think it's backfiring, because when I talk to people in my family in Milwaukee and people around the neighborhood. They don't care about voting. They don't think things have changed. They say Biden, he hasn't done anything to prove that he would change anything, and Trump is just just as bad as any other Republican. So I think instead of what I've mostly been seeing online and people who I've interacted with who think vote shaming works, I don't think that works. I think if they want to change anything, they have to prove that they were going to change the situation of living conditions, of racial disparities, of police brutality, of economic conditions, and only until then will things actually change. And I can tell you, my grandma, she's not a huge into politics, but she loved Bernie, and she was advocating for Bernie, and as soon as he dropped out of the race, she was like, "Oh, I'm pretty much done with this." So, I mean, I think people need to actually think about, um, what policies people are facing, because right now it's just suppressing the vote, and it's not really helping.
Wow, yeah, I've heard that actually, that sentiment. A lot of people, a lot of the criticism from some of the right stems that these protests are just being manipulated for votes for Biden. But I honestly haven't seen that. I have seen a lot of disappointment with Joe Biden from the African American community. So thank you for making that clear. A lot of people just make a lot of assumptions. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about what's happening or about what you guys are doing in Wisconsin?
Basically, I would just like to say that no politician is gonna change things for us. The way we change things is being politically active as activists. We get in the streets, we make phone calls to our local officials, we vote the people who are not pushing the right agenda out. Because at the end of the day, none of these politicians are our savior, and I think that's what I like about our Wisconsin Revolution, is because we're actually trying to fight to change the political landscape in Wisconsin, not just have people who are, just not the other guy. We want people to actually stand for something. So definitely, I would just encourage people to get involved in Wisconsin, because we have a long fight ahead of us, whether it's a Democratic administration or a Republican administration.
Well, thank you, Andre, for your account, and thank you for being out there. It's absolutely appreciated. We're gonna have Alexa on next in a few minutes, so we're gonna go on a quick break.
Okay, and make sure you guys subscribe to Convo Couch.
Thanks, guys. Check out OWR, our Wisconsin Revolution. We'll be right back. All right, guys. So we are back, and we have our second guest. She is Alexa Safer. She's a state board member of also our Wisconsin Revolution. Alexa, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I have seen some of your posts on Facebook, and I know you were there the night that Kyle Rittenhouse began shooting people. The reason I asked you to come on is because we have been covering the protest, and we have been getting a lot of people from the right saying that this man acted in self-defense, but that is counter. It doesn't fit what other people who were there were saying. So I wanted to get your account. So what happened? Can you describe the protest and the events that led up to Kyle Rittenhouse shooting people?
Okay, so I'm from Milwaukee, and I came with a group of people from Milwaukee. We drove in a caravan down to Kenosha, and we had a kind of a hard time getting into the city. They tried to block the exits and stuff, so we couldn't get in there, but we did get in, and then we were, we went to the courthouse where everybody was kind of convening, and it was really peaceful. I made a video where it was just people kind of hanging out in a park, and then it seemed like some people were kind of stationing themselves right in front of the courthouse, sitting down and chanting. And then I noticed that it seemed like some people were throwing water bottles over the fence toward the police, and that's when things just started to escalate. It was like went from water bottles to pepper balls being thrown into the crowd and tear gas. And then they had two tanks that drove right into the park, and people were running, to try not to be run over by the tanks. And like, while we were at the park, it seemed, we figured when we tried to get back out that all of our exits were blocked. Like, the block that we had walked up to get to the park, we couldn't go down it anymore. And so we were kind of confused as to how to get back to our cars. Okay. And then at about 9:45 p.m., we got word that our tires had been slashed and we needed to get back to our cars. So we tried to collect ourselves in one parking lot. And that was when we started to see like green dots all over the place. There were snipers, or there were people with guns on the roofs and in the windows aiming at us in the parking lot.
Were these people police?
No. Okay. They weren't police. And so we were running and hiding behind cars and dumpsters, and we were finally like, okay, we just need to go back to the cars. So we started walking back to our cars, and we were on a pretty quiet block, about two blocks from our cars, and three people, white people, men, popped up from behind some cars in the parking lot across the street, and they aimed their semi-automatic weapons at our group of 5 people. And they started calling us racial slurs and telling us they were going to shoot us if we didn't get out, and telling us to run. And so it was really terrifying. And I saw there was a kid there with a green shirt and a hat on. And I saw him screaming at me. And so first we ducked, and then we decided to run. We ran the entire way back to our cars. And when we got there, our tires were slashed. So we started working on them right away to get everything changed so we could get out of there. And then we heard a gunshot, and it was, we heard people yelling and running. We could hear stuff. And then my friend and I got in the car, and we were like, oh my God, what's happening? And then we heard more gunshots. And then people came running to our group saying, there's a white supremacist shooting people. Somebody's dead. Like, you guys need to get out of here. But we couldn't go anywhere because we were on flat tires.
Right.
So we basically sat there until 3:00 in the morning until we could get all of our cars movable again. And then we got out of there as quickly as we could.
So to your knowledge, because I saw your Facebook post, Joey Cope posted something, and there was an article also below it that he said before Kyle murdered 2 people and severely injured another, myself and others had walked past Kyle and his group of friends who wanted to come play army and shoot. I was across the street minding my own business, just trying to get to where our cars were parked. From across the street, Kyle and his army of goons decided to taunt me and my family, aimed all of their guns at us, screamed at us while threatening to shoot because we were walking on the sidewalk across the street, minding our own business. It was at that very moment we should have defended ourselves and taken Kyle down, but we still chose peace and tried to get away safely. Kyle ended up killing 2 shortly after and injuring others. In the same manner, he acted towards us. My friend is undergoing surgery as I write this. Kyle came out here for blood, period. He is a murderer. So, there was an account too. Can you speak as to what, because you said you saw him, had he shot people? Because a lot of people say people came at him and that's why he shot people. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Okay, well, I mean, I was at my car a block away when the shooting happened, so I didn't see it like with my own eyes. What I saw was Kyle about 20 to 30 minutes before with 2 other people, and the person that's account you just read, that person was not in my group. So like these are 2 separate groups that were threatened in the same way by these people.
Okay.
But I saw him. We were literally just going back to our cars. We didn't threaten him and say anything to them. They just got popped up from behind the cars and started screaming at us and aiming their guns at us. And I will be honest, I wasn't armed, but some of the people I was with were, and I know there is some guilt that is going around because our side doesn't want to use our guns. We don't want to hurt anybody. And so the idea that because we didn't stop him, he went and killed 2 people 20 minutes later, that's really hard to live with, And so everybody's saying that they would have, jumped this guy or any kind, you don't know what you would do in that situation. It's extremely terrifying to have somebody aiming semi-automatic weapons at you. You don't know how you're going to react. I didn't think to turn on my camera. I was just thinking about my kids and getting home.
Exactly. How has this experience changed you?
I've always had a lot of hope in the American dream. My grandparents came here as very young babies, fleeing the pogroms in Eastern Europe where they were from, were Jews. And when I see this kind of white supremacy growing and building in the United States, I not only fear for my Black and brown friends, but also for myself and my family. So their fight is my fight. And the way that it's just, this particular instance has changed me in that I realize now that there is like a war going on. I was on the streets of a war zone, and the police were not there to protect the peaceful protesters. They were enabling the white supremacists. And so I have realized that, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not hopeful that if Trump wins, things will get any better. And I don't know that Biden can fix it either. I'm very worried that we're at a point in American history that we've never been at before, but other countries have experienced. And, it scares me. I feel like people aren't taking it seriously. And I don't know if people need to see for themselves 70 cars of white supremacists driving into your town to understand what's happening, but that's what's happening. I mean, they're organized, they're armed, and they want to create chaos where we are just asking for justice. None of us, I've been marching with the people here in Milwaukee for 95 days, not every day, but I'm there. And we have not burnt anything. We don't break windows. We are not violent people. We are simply looking for equity, equality, and justice, which is what this country is supposed to be about. So,
and in covering these protests ourselves, it's a lot of people have been claiming, there's always a but, like, oh, but this person didn't follow the rules. Oh, but Kyle was attacked. he was helping protesters beforehand. He had a medic kit. There are all these things that are being said right now from people who aren't even there. So in your opinion, is Kenosha a racist town? And what is the reputation of police in that area? Because we did see the video of police thanking Kyle and the vigilantes for being there.
I'm going to be really blunt. The police in Wisconsin and in general do not have a good reputation. So I'm not from Kenosha, but I know that there have been a lot of problems there. There's a lot of racial segregation in Kenosha, as there are in most cities of any size here in Wisconsin. And so, when I'm listening to the police scanner and I can hear that they know that white supremacists are coming down and they're not trying to block them, they're blocking us.
Right.
That makes me think, like, what is happening here? I think that the police, there was just a couple days ago, there was a group called Whites for Wauwatosa, which is another community it's about 20 minutes west of Milwaukee. And they sent out a letter to some residents, basically saying we want to keep Wauwatosa whites. We want to keep Wauwatosa safe. And the police are not investigating this. They're not concerned about it. They've announced that they're not doing anything about it. So, it's scary because what you realize is that the police are paid by the state. If the state is fighting the people, that's fascism. So yeah. That's why I'm out fighting. I'm fighting against fascism. And I hear a lot of people saying things about Antifa and this and that. I don't know. I guess Antifa as a group has a bad reputation. I'm not part of the group. But I mean, when I hear anti-fascist, to me, that sounds like a good thing. I understand Antifa has been responsible for, I guess, bad things. But the idea of being an anti-fascist, I mean, we should all be that if we're Americans.
Right. What is your opinion on Wisconsin's current leadership, both Democratic and Republican, with what's happening? It seems like our entire leadership federally has also failed. Living here in California, we have a full Democratic state, but we continue to have unjustified police killings. What's your opinion on the Wisconsin leadership?
Okay, I am a cannabis activist, and I've been going to the Capitol talking to our elected officials on why they're not moving on legalizing cannabis. And what I realized that I didn't know is that Wisconsin's economy is very much based on prisons. We have a lot of prisons, private prisons in Wisconsin, and these whatever businesses they are, private prisons, donate a lot of money to our elected officials, the Republicans especially. So when you try to talk to them about anything about criminal justice reform or cannabis legalization or anything like that, like if it's going to lower the population in the prisons, they don't want to do it because those are dollar signs to them. They're making money off of every person that they imprison. And so they have no incentive in their mind to change anything. And what that really tells you is that our elected officials don't represent us. They represent the businesses and the large interests, the huge, big special interests that give them money, donate to their campaigns, and keep them in office. So as long as we have this kind of a system where both parties are funded by special interests, we're not going to get what the people want because, that just makes sense. If they're the ones giving them the money, why would they stop doing what they want?
And you talk about the criminal justice system and the prison system. Biden was one of the architects with his writing of the 1994 crime bill, which Bill Clinton signed into law, which ultimately led to mass incarcerations of people of color, which led to a lot of what's happening today. How will voting for Biden get us anywhere? I mean, obviously the options are Trump or Biden and then third parties, but one of those two is going to be president. How do we grapple with this reality?
This is a really tough one for me. I have been a Bernie Sanders supporter since 2015. I've spent countless hours volunteering for his campaign, and I believe in his policies. And so to see the DNC make the same mistake again, it's like they've learned nothing from 2016. They're not offering progressives anything. And so I know a lot of young people my age, I'm 38. I know a lot of people in my generation are just like, neither of these parties are offering us anything. Nothing's going to change under either one of them. And everything, I'm still not going to have healthcare. I'm still not going to have a living wage. I'm still going to incarceration. Nothing's going to change with criminal justice or racial justice. So why why even bother? I'm to the point where I know that I can't live under a fascist state. Like, I know that I can't survive in fascism. So I'm voting for Biden because it's like a Hail Mary. But I honestly I don't think that's the solution. I think if Biden wins and we can get the Senate also, then, Bernie will be in charge of the budget, or he'll at least be the ranking member of the budget committee. And that would give us a lot of control and power over what happens with our tax dollars. But I understand why people I understand why people don't feel that there is no difference.
Yeah.
I understand that. I don't want to try to convince anybody to anything that they're uncomfortable with.
It's
But
a
I
tough
do feel
situation.
that Trump is a fascist.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for people. I don't think people should vote shame, in general.
No.
But like what I wanted to ask you as well is why and is it that what Trump is fomenting dangerous? How is that so dangerous? Because I think a lot of people in the progressive community are like done with either the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, but a lot of people miss that a lot of what Trump is saying may not mean a lot to a lot of us, but it does mean a lot to certain people of his base. Why is what he is saying so dangerous? And what do you think Wisconsin will do? Do you think Wisconsin will go red? Do you think it'll go blue?
Okay, so I think that it's really important to look at history when you are thinking about any of these kinds of things. If you look at the history of what happened in Germany, Hitler sent a lot of his people, like his supporters, into liberal strongholds like Weimar to create riots. And then he claimed he was the only one that could keep the peace. And in my opinion, that's what Trump is doing right now. There are peaceful protests going on. He is encouraging his people to come out and to oppose it. And his people, unfortunately, are white supremacists. They are people who believe that this country should be a white country and that anyone who isn't white should be at a lower status. As a Jew, I know that I can't live in a white supremacist country. So for me, I feel like if Biden wins, we at least have a chance to save this country and start a people's party that would have support from a large segment of society. If we really break it down, this is the problems we have are economic, and we share a class struggle, whether we're white, black, brown, Asian, whatever it is. There's a class struggle happening right now. We're at economic conditions that are never been seen since the Great Depression. So that's where we can, whenever you have financial stress or anxiety in a country, there's backlash against certain segments of the community, specifically immigrants and, minorities. So, I expect things to get worse. I don't know who's going to win here. There are a lot of progressives who are talking about protest voting. And so I could see a situation in which Trump wins Wisconsin, but, we gain seats in the Senate. I'm really not sure. I would say that if Biden wants to win, he better get out here and start talking to the people.
Right. So the other side of the coin is if Biden wins, a lot of people will go back to sleep. Like, like during the Obama years, people were hanging on for hope and change. And then we realized that wasn't necessarily it. So Trump, in a way, has fomented a lot of the racism, but he has also fomented a lot of the other side, the left rising up and having these protests and all these things. How could we keep that alive if Biden were to win?
This was a huge concern of mine, really a huge concern, because I understand the idea that people will go to sleep because I was asleep. I didn't know what Obama was doing. I wasn't aware of the deportations and the separation. I wasn't aware of what was happening until Trump came around, and then
Right.
I became aware, and now I am worried. I don't want people to go back to sleep. I'm just afraid that I don't want the awakening to come at the cost of the loss of our democracy. So I am more concerned that if we protest vote, I don't want to convince anybody to do anything, okay? But in my life, personally, I know that I can't live under 4 more years of Trump. And with him talking about 12 more years and all this, the crazy things that he says about the election results and all that kind of stuff, it already feels like we're losing our democracy to me. So, I get where people's concerns are. We definitely don't want the progressive movement to die. But if Trump wins, there might not, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. What opportunity will we have to build the People's Party that so many of us want to build? I mean, that is the dream. So I don't know if this is the path forward, and I don't know what's right or wrong. I just know that definitely I want Trump to lose.
And just going back to the protest for a minute, this last question, what is the end goal of the protest? How do we get change through the protest? How do we fix this problem?
Okay, so I think this is a big thing that everyone's thinking, like, what are we marching for? What are we marching towards, right? First, I would just want to say that this is not a new struggle. This fight is the continuation of the fight that Martin Luther King was fighting. Many people before him have been fighting. This is like from the inception of this country, we've had this original sin we've had to deal with. So this is nothing new. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like how do we what is the end goal of yeah.
So I mean, obviously, I guess the end goal is to be heard. People want change. They want there to be a change in the criminal justice system. We want police to be trained different. We want less police. We want them to have less money. All of the money that goes in these budgets that are going towards, it's like majority of the money goes towards policing, when we have people, like, we really need services in our communities. We need community services. We need money for schools. We need money for families. We need money for counselors in communities. We need money for all kinds of things. And all the money is getting sucked up by law enforcement. And honestly, they do get called for things that we could have other people helping with, so that situations wouldn't escalate to the point where they do. So I think that mainly when people say defund the police, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about, take some of that money and reinvest it in our communities instead of just policing, and criminalizing us. So I think that is, the end goal is to have leaders who listen to us. We want to be heard. And that's why it's so frustrating when they put in a curfew and tell you to get off the street and shut up, because all you're trying to do is be heard. People just want to, they want to be heard, and they want to see some reaction. And I think that's where, if Biden wants to win, he could step up right now and say something like strong toward the protesters that is in support of them. And this movement, that would make a big difference. Support the immigrants who are fighting against ICE. I mean, these are all legs or arms of the same, monster. Basically, it's this fascist monster that's trying to take over our country, and we need to fight it at every possible chance that we get.
Is violence at all? Martin Luther King was a pacifist for most of his life, but towards the end of his life, he kind of started realizing, like, they're trying to kill me, so I have to defend myself. Malcolm X was more of a take arms kind of guy. Is violence in when you're an oppressed people, is that even ever retaliation, even violence? Like, how can we justify violence at a point where protesters are being attacked? I mean, I know none of us want to get there, but is there a justification for violence under an oppressive fascistic system?
Yes, and I, as a white person in this, I'm white, I'm Jewish, but I'm white. I'm not going to tell the oppressed peoples in this country how to react. I mean, that's not my place. The violence that I have seen, when they rushed Kyle after he shot someone in the head, I think that's what we should be doing. We need to try to take these people down. We can't just let them shoot us. I mean, that's crazy. The people that I march with, many of them are armed, and they have, it's legal here in Wisconsin to own a gun, to carry a gun. We have open carry here. So if we're going to be threatened by white supremacists who are armed, then it would be stupid to go in there with nothing. One of the biggest things that I learned from, like, I mean, one of the lessons of the Holocaust, the first thing they did was they took all the guns away from the people. The only people who had guns in Germany were the state. So if we're going to be a country that has gun ownership, and there are going to be white supremacists walking around patrolling, basically they think they're doing the streets, there does come a point where you need to protect yourself. And that is why, you know, I have said to many of my friends on the left, like, it's time, you know, it may be time to arm ourselves, because it's clearly not safe out there anymore. You can't go to a protest and just expect it to be safe. That's what I've learned. There are people there who are agitating and trying to make things happen that are, you know, just really despicable.
Is there anything else that you want to say, the audience, like let them know about this movement, about your experience before we head out?
Yeah, I want to say that the people that I'm marching with here in Milwaukee are some of the most, like, inclusive, welcoming people I've ever met. They've made me feel so welcome. There were some a speaker on last Saturday who said some things that, you know, OWR wasn't comfortable with, and a lot of people there weren't comfortable with. And I checked in with my group and I was like, hey, you guys, like, am I still welcome with you? And it was like straight up like, we need you, we want you, you need to stay. Like, this movement is for anybody who's not, if you're not racist, if you're not a white supremacist, and you don't think this country should be represented by those people, this is the movement you need to be with. And I just want to say that I you know, I love everybody in the People's Revolution here in Milwaukee, and I want everybody to stay safe. And I hope that everybody takes a really close look at this election and understands how important it truly is. I'm not trying to be somebody with Trump derangement syndrome or anything like that, but I've literally been on the streets. I've had white supremacists and fascists threaten to kill me. This is not a joke anymore. Like, we need to save the country. And if Biden does win, we need to hold him to the fire and get everything that we want, including Medicare for all, and the, you know, criminal justice reform, all of the immigration reform, all the things that we've been asking for that Bernie talked about. We need to fight for even after this ends.
All right, Alexa, thank you very much. And thank you guys for watching. Please check out our ROKFIN, ROKFIN. It's free to join. It's another platform in case YouTube takes us down. Once again, thank you, Alexa, and thank you everybody that has been out there in Wisconsin. Bye,
Thank you, guys.
Convo out. Peace.